It's been a rough few weeks for Elon Musk, with Tesla stock prices plummeting and dealerships being vandalized. As Fox 11's Christy Fajardo reports, today protesters demonstrated outside Tesla dealerships to share their wrath at the billionaire and his Doge activities.
In less than 30 days, $135 billion vanished. Elon Musk's empire crumbled, and behind the scenes, Canada and the European Union were orchestrating a takedown years in the making. While the media blamed market jitters and Musk's Twitter meltdowns, the truth was buried beneath other layers. This wasn't business, it was warfare, a trade war disguised as patriotism detonated beneath Tesla's global supply chains, and the fallout spread like wildfire. Suddenly, the company once seen as untouchable found itself locked out of international market, abandoned by consumers, and targeted by governments it once called partners. So why did Canada turn? How did Europe strike back? And why are American workers now calling for Elon's resignation? What's happening? In early April of 2025, Canada dropped a bombshell. Effective immediately, Tesla vehicles would no longer qualify for federal electric vehicle rebates. The justification was framed around financial scrutiny and audit concerns, but the message was unmistakable. Tesla was being punished. Adding salt to the wound, the Canadian government also froze 43 million Canadian dollars in pending rebate claims, choking off an entire quarter's worth of sales incentives. Tesla's Canadian market, once its second largest outside of the United States, collapsed in less than 72 hours. Dealerships reported customer cancellations in record numbers. Inventory surged as financing deals fell apart, and with a single bureaucratic signature, Elon Musk's stronghold in the north had turned into dead weight. But that was only the beginning. The European Union, already simmering with anger over Trump's tariffs, responded with its own economic artillery. A series of retaliatory tariffs specifically targeting American-made electric vehicles were passed in a matter of days. But perhaps more devastating than the taxes were the exclusions. Tesla, once a darling of European innovation and clean energy goals, was now barred from EV subsidy programs in countries like Germany, France, and Italy. Consumers were forced to pay thousands more to purchase a Tesla, while Volkswagen, Renault, and Stellantis models remained subsidized and affordable. European leaders were not subtle in their messaging. They called out Musk by name. They linked Tesla to Trump's aggressive economic policy, and they made it clear if Tesla wanted to play politics, it would face political consequences. Inside Tesla, executives were stunned. Musk had believed that the brand's global prestige would protect it. But what he failed to grasp was how deeply personal these retaliations were. European and Canadian officials were not just punishing a company, they were punishing a symbol of American arrogance. The numbers were brutal. Within 3 months, Tesla's export volume to Europe and Canada plummeted by nearly 40%. Profit forecasts were slashed across the board. Tesla's international expansion plans were halted. And on Wall Street, the panic began to spread. Yet, while governments delivered economic strikes, Elon Musk turned up the volume in all the worst ways. Before we dive into the next twist, don't forget to subscribe. Meltdown in real time. In a moment that called for restraint, diplomacy, and stability, Elon Musk chose chaos. As investors panicked, customers revolted, and global partners backed away, Musk took to the one place he could still control: the internet. He launched into tirades on social media, defending the tariffs, mocking critics, and accusing European and Canadian officials of economic sabotage. His rhetoric was sharp, erratic, and escalating. He dismissed regulators as bureaucratic parasites. He called union protests political theater. In a televised interview, when asked about Tesla's falling stock price, Musk responded with a smirk. "If you don't like the volatility, don't buy Tesla." That line, intended as bravado, was the final straw for many institutional investors. Pension fund managers and hedge funds, already uneasy about Tesla's worsening financials, began pulling out. Quietly, deliberately, they dumped Tesla stock by the millions. Automated sell-offs triggered further crashes. In just 9 weeks, Tesla's stock value entered a historic freefall. But the damage wasn't limited to Wall Street. Internally, employees were rattled. Suppliers began asking hard questions. Board members scrambled to contain the fallout as Musk grew increasingly untethered. The once charismatic CEO had become the face of volatility, and the very markets that once celebrated his unpredictability now viewed it as recklessness. And as Elon Musk raged in public, Something far more dangerous was happening behind the scenes, something no tweet storm could stop. The very people who had once powered Tesla's rise were now fueling its unraveling, and as the workforce revolt engulfed the company's domestic operations, a far more organized rival had already seized the moment. Volkswagen's coup. While Elon Musk was busy alienating allies and torching investor trust, Volkswagen was busy rewriting the rules of the electric vehicle game. As Tesla unraveled, Volkswagen advanced quietly, efficiently, and ruthlessly. The German automaker had been preparing for this moment for years. With its modular electric platform, the MEB architecture, Volkswagen had the capacity to churn out electric hatchbacks, sedans, and SUVs at scale, with localized production in Germany, France, and Eastern Europe. So when Canada and the European Union began cutting Tesla out of subsidy programs and slapping tariffs on American imports, Volkswagen became the natural beneficiary. It started with pricing. Without the weight of American tariffs and with an efficient supply chain built inside the EU, Volkswagen slashed prices across its electric lineup. Middle-class consumers who once dreamed of owning a Tesla now found affordable, stylish alternatives made just down the road. Tesla's Model 3 and Model Y, burdened by surging costs and lost subsidies, became obsolete overnight. Then came the marketing. Volkswagen launched massive campaigns framing their vehicles as the true European choice, backed by EU subsidies, built with EU labor, and untainted by the chaos in Washington. Dealerships across Europe showcased Volkswagen EV as symbols of national pride and technological stability. By the end of March 2025, Tesla's market share in Europe had collapsed. Volkswagen didn't just take Tesla's customers, they took Tesla's narrative. The German brand became the face of reliability, sustainability, and economic sovereignty. And while Elon Musk tried to put out fires at home, he didn't realize Germany had already locked the gates abroad. But just as Tesla lost Europe, another threat emerged. Faster, hungrier, and halfway across the world. But halfway across the world, an even deadlier threat was waiting: BYD's global takeover. While Elon Musk was consumed by headlines, political feuds, and public meltdowns, one competitor was quietly executing the most devastating power grab in the history of the electric vehicle market. That competitor was China's Build Your Dreams, better known globally as BYD. And while Tesla was still reeling from the trade war backlash and consumer revolts, BYD was closing in fast, taking the markets Tesla thought it owned, and doing it without breaking a sweat. What made BYD so dangerous wasn't just its size, it was its control. BYD had long embraced vertical integration. Unlike Tesla, which still depended on overseas partnerships for essential components, BYD manufactured its own battery, designed its own chips, and refined its own raw material. This independence meant that BYD was largely insulated from the trade fallout that crippled Tesla. When tariffs strangled Tesla's production lines, BYD simply accelerated theirs. And when Canada and the European Union slammed the door on American-made electric vehicles, BYD was already stepping through the front gates. In markets across Asia, Latin America, and Africa, governments that once considered Tesla a status symbol began striking new deals with BYD. These were not just consumer markets. They were entire national infrastructure. In Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, government fleet contracts were torn from Tesla's grip and handed to BYD. In Kenya, Nigeria, and South Africa, electric bus deals were rewritten. In Brazil and Argentina, BYD secured massive tax incentives to build local battery plants and assembly lines. Tesla was not simply losing, Tesla was being replaced. This global shift was not just about pricing or tariffs. It was about who could deliver trust and reliability in a world rocked by economic instability. Tesla was seen as volatile, both in pricing and leadership. BYD, by contrast, moved like a quiet juggernaut. It offered competitive pricing, strong warranty, local production agreement, and something Tesla no longer could: political neutrality. Governments weary of America's erratic trade policies preferred to work with a company that wasn't attached to Elon Musk's political baggage. Within 5 months of Tesla's initial crash, BYD's global market share had surged. The company expanded operations in nearly 24 countries, absorbing Tesla's vacated sales pipelines like a sponge. At a time when Tesla's headlines were about plant shutdowns and investor panic, BYD was holding ribbon-cutting ceremonies and announcing record sales. In the span of just half a year, Tesla's hard-earned global dominance disintegrated, and BYD emerged as the undisputed king of emerging markets. And then came the real psychological blow. Tesla had spent more than 1 decade building the myth of its own inevitability, of being the one true leader of the electric future. BYD shattered that myth with numbers. In the first quarter of 2025, BYD outsold Tesla in total global units. That milestone, once unthinkable, was no longer a distant threat. It was reality. As Elon Musk scrambled to put out fires at home, he failed to notice that his greatest competitor had already claimed Tesla's throne on the international stage. But while Musk was losing sleep over BYD's global takeover, an even greater betrayal was brewing. This time from a nation Tesla once considered its safest ally. And then came the betrayal Elon never expected, from north of the border. Canada's final strike. After months of escalating trade disputes and retaliatory tariffs, Canada issued a shock decision that stunned the global auto industry. In an emergency parliamentary session, legislation was passed that banned the export of critical minerals to any American automaker linked to political interference or economic retaliation. The target was clear. This wasn't just a trade adjustment, it was a declaration of economic war on Tesla. Almost overnight, Tesla's access to nickel, cobalt, and lithium was severed. The minerals that once flowed south to its battery plants were now being redirected to Europe and Asia. Volkswagen signed a 10-year contract for exclusive lithium shipments from Quebec. BYD negotiated priority access to Canadian nickel through a new refinery project in Ontario. Tesla locked out. Tesla's leadership tried to downplay the crisis, claiming it could pivot to alternative sources. But the truth was darker. Most of the world's remaining high-quality mineral reserves were either controlled by Chinese interests or inaccessible due to political instability. Elon Musk had gambled on Canada's loyalty and lost everything. Within weeks, Tesla's gigafactory output dropped by 35%. Battery assembly slowed to a crawl, and production costs soared. Some vehicle lines were paused indefinitely. Tesla dealerships across North America began receiving notice that delivery dates were being pushed back by several months. Consumers, already frustrated by price hikes and political chaos, abandoned their orders in droves. Wall Street responded with fury. Tesla's stock, already under severe pressure, dropped by another 12% following the announcement. Analysts warned that the mineral embargo could cause irreversible long-term damage to Tesla's supply chain and product competitiveness. In internal calls, senior Tesla engineers expressed doubts that the company could meet production targets for the next fiscal year. The symbolism was devastating. Canada, the quiet ally, the neighbor who had once underwritten Tesla's success, had now become the executioner. It wasn't just a loss of resources. It was a loss of trust, stability, and strategic advantage. And as production collapsed, the entire market turned away. The global pivot. As Tesla's stock crashed and its factories sputtered, the broader global market made a swift and merciless pivot. Once considered the flagship of the electric vehicle revolution, Tesla was now seen as unreliable, overpriced, and politically radioactive. And the shift wasn't happening slowly. It was happening in real time. Across Europe and Asia, cities began removing Tesla-exclusive charging stations in favor of universal platforms compatible with all EV brands. Local governments that had once partnered with Tesla on infrastructure projects were now tearing up contracts and replacing them with public-private partnerships that prioritized national or regional automakers. In Canada, Tesla superchargers were quietly dismantled in favor of co-branded stations shared between domestic EV companies and European partners. Fleet contracts, once a guaranteed source of volume sales, were the next to go. Delivery firms, police departments, ride-hailing services, and government agencies began canceling Tesla orders and shifting to brands like Renault, Volkswagen, and BYD. The U.S. Postal Service, under political pressure, froze all future Tesla purchases, citing national security concerns over software integration. Meanwhile, in Mexico and Brazil, entire federal fleets shifted to non-American automakers. Even corporate giants began turning away. Tech companies in Asia and financial firms in Europe removed Tesla from their preferred vendor lists. Leasing programs were halted. And in the final insult, several national insurance associations raised premium rates on Tesla vehicles, citing volatility in parts, availability, and manufacturer instability. Tesla had not just lost sales, it had lost relevance. It was no longer the aspirational brand leading a clean future. It was now seen as a cautionary tale, a company that rose too fast, leaned too hard on political protection, and collapsed under its own weight. The change in tone was chilling. Industry publications that once celebrated every Tesla earnings call now ran headlines asking, "Is Tesla the next Nokia?" Financial influencers began promoting alternative EV stocks. Analysts advised clients to diversify away from Tesla, calling it a fading leader in a market that no longer waits. But the biggest revolt wasn't corporate, it was human. The labor rebellion, workers turn against the machine. Tesla had always projected an image of innovation, speed, and unstoppable growth. But none of that was possible without the workers who toiled in its factories day and night. From the clean rooms of Nevada to the sprawling plants in Fremont and Austin, it was American labor that powered Tesla's meteoric rise. But in 2025, those same workers became its fiercest enemies. The first signs of revolt came from within the Gigafactory in Austin, Texas. Workers reported mandatory overtime, frozen wages, and increasing safety violations. Morale was crumbling. When word spread that Tesla's stock crash had wiped out millions in employee stock option value, the tension snapped. A spontaneous walkout erupted, drawing hundreds of factory workers into the parking lot, holding signs that read, "We built this, you broke it." Within days, similar actions appeared in Fremont, California, and Sparks, Nevada. Union organizers, long shut out of Tesla's facilities, found their moment. They rallied workers with promises of protections, collective bargaining, and fair compensation. What began as isolated protests turned into a coordinated strike. Tesla's response was swift and brutal. Firings, lockouts, and legal threats followed. But instead of quelling the rebellion, it inflamed it. Videos of workers being escorted out by security went viral. Public opinion turned. Labor unions across the country began issuing statements of solidarity. By early May, nearly 20,000 Tesla workers were on strike. Production lines stopped. Vehicles sat unfinished. Executives scrambled to contain the damage as national media covered the unfolding crisis. Polls showed a sharp shift in public sympathy, from Elon Musk to the workers on the factory floor. This was not just a labor dispute, it was a national reckoning. Tesla, once the symbol of American innovation, had become the face of corporate arrogance. Workers who once took pride in building the future now marched under banners that read, "No future without us." And what started as a company's fall became a national crisis. The market shock: how Tesla broke the U.S. economy. When Tesla's market value plummeted by $135 billion, it wasn't just Elon Musk who suffered. It was the financial foundation of the United States. Wall Street had long treated Tesla as a cornerstone of American innovation, a tech-driven golden goose, capable of sustaining long-term growth across multiple sectors. But when the collapse came, it didn't stay contained. The shock reverberated through pension funds, retirement accounts, and institutional portfolios, unraveling decades of investor optimism in a matter of days. Major indexes like the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the Standard & Poor's 500 tanked in unison as institutional investors scrambled to rebalance risk. It wasn't a normal correction, it was a free fall. Tesla had become so deeply embedded in mutual funds and pension holdings that its crash instantly wiped out value across nearly every major financial institution in the country. For millions of ordinary Americans, the effect was brutal and immediate. Their retirement savings shrank, their investment portfolios bled red, and unlike speculative tech bubbles of the past, this one had been government-approved, incentivized, and mainstreamed into household wealth. Credit tightened across the board. With investor confidence shaken, banks and lenders began pulling back. Credit lines for manufacturers, clean energy firms, and even tech startups suddenly evaporated. Venture capital froze. Initial public offerings stalled. The cascading failure of one electric vehicle company had triggered a confidence collapse across the entire green energy sector, and no one was ready for it. Even the housing market began to feel the impact. Mortgage rates ticked upward as financial institutions scrambled to secure liquidity. Homebuyers, suddenly facing tighter credit conditions and shrinking savings, pulled out of deals en masse. Housing inventory rose. Prices softened. Local economies that depended on Tesla-linked employment, like Fremont, Austin, and Sparks, watched property values decline in real time. The ripple effects didn't stop there. States that had invested public money into Tesla plants and infrastructure began facing budget crises. Michigan, Ohio, and California had all made multi-billion-dollar bets on Tesla-related job creation and energy grid integration. Now those investments were turning into liabilities. Layoffs began not just at Tesla factories, but in the public sector. City governments slashed budgets. Transportation projects stalled. School funding took a hit. And in Washington, the tone shifted from triumph to panic. Officials who once praised Musk as a visionary were now being grilled on Capitol Hill for regulatory failures and blind economic faith in a single corporate titan. The White House convened emergency meetings with financial regulators, attempting to stem the bleeding before it spiraled further. But by the time intervention was even discussed, the damage was already done. Tesla had not just collapsed, it had cracked the economic armor of the United States. A company once viewed as the future of American dominance had become the very mechanism of its unraveling. But while America struggled to contain the internal collapse, something even more dangerous was already unfolding beyond its borders. And outside our borders, old allies were rewriting the rules. The trade war backfires. As the Tesla collapse dominated American headlines, the rest of the world began drafting a new playbook, one that excluded the United States entirely. The trade policies that had sparked the original crisis were now returning with a vengeance. Only this time the retaliation was broader, deeper, and strategically engineered to isolate the U.S. economy on all fronts. In Ottawa and Brussels, trade ministers moved swiftly. Canada expanded its existing tariffs on American electric vehicles to include technology exports, critical minerals, and software licensing. European Union leaders followed with coordinated measures targeting not just Tesla, but any U.S.-based automaker operating abroad. American companies found themselves suddenly blocked from accessing infrastructure tenders, tax incentives, and renewable energy partnerships that had previously been routine. The message was unmistakable. American economic aggression would no longer be tolerated. Latin American nations, long caught between U.S. influence and Chinese expansion, made their choice. Brazil, Argentina, and Chile accelerated bilateral agreements with European and Chinese partners. Infrastructure development plans that once featured Tesla-branded charging stations now favored Build Your Dreams units. Government fleets, once bound by memoranda of understanding with Tesla, were quietly reallocated to Volkswagen or Hyundai. The realignment was swift, decisive, and deeply humiliating for a country that once led the electric revolution. In Asia, the pivot was even more dramatic. South Korea and Japan, both of whom had been strategic partners in the EV race, began distancing themselves from American components and materials. China, seizing the moment, positioned itself as the global leader in electric vehicle technology and clean energy manufacturing. State-backed media campaigns painted the United States as politically unstable, economically reckless, and strategically irrelevant. The collapse of Tesla became a symbol, proof that American tech leadership was not only overhyped, but dangerously fragile. By the summer of 2025, global capital flows had shifted. Foreign investment in U.S. manufacturing plunged. Sovereign wealth funds rebalanced toward Asia and Europe. The dollar began to slide against a basket of currencies tied to green energy sectors. Foreign leaders no longer spoke of competition with the U.S., they spoke of replacement. And so the trade war that had once been sold as a patriotic defense of American jobs had become a self-inflicted global retreat. The electric vehicle market, once Tesla's playground, now belonged to everyone else. The consequences were no longer financial, they were geopolitical. In Washington, it only had 3 cards left to play: America's terrifying choices. In the wake of Tesla's implosion and the global economic backlash, the United States found itself boxed into a corner. Policy advisors and economic analysts agreed on one chilling truth: there were only 3 ways forward, and all of them carried catastrophic consequences. The first option was to rebuild the alliances that had been shattered. Canada and the European Union had made it clear that any path to reconciliation would require rolling back the very tariffs that had triggered the crisis. That meant admitting that the protectionist strategy had failed. For a White House built on promises of strength, independence, and economic nationalism, such an admission was politically toxic. To concede would be to destroy the image of control. Yet, failing to concede meant continued isolation and decline. The second option was to double down on domestic production. This was the nationalist dream: to build an entirely American-made EV supply chain. Industry leaders pushed for massive investment in domestic battery refining, semiconductor fabrication, and mineral extraction. But building such infrastructure from scratch would take years. Even with fast-tracked permits and regulatory rollbacks, the cost would be astronomical. And worse, it offered no short-term relief for the millions of workers, investors, and communities already suffering the fallout. The third option was the darkest of all: seek new economic partners among unstable or authoritarian regimes. Talks with Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and Congo had already begun in private. These nations held critical reserves of the very minerals Tesla could no longer access: lithium, cobalt, and nickel. They were willing to sell, but at a political and moral price. Economic dependence on volatile partners would invite new risks, from supply extortion to diplomatic blackmail. And if the American public learned that their electric future now depended on dictatorships, the backlash could be apocalyptic. Each path was a trap, all were politically radioactive, and none addressed the immediate crisis unfolding at home. The American dream of clean tech dominance had turned into a geopolitical maze with no exits. And while leaders debated, Elon Musk faced his final reckoning: the death of a tech empire. Elon Musk once stood at the pinnacle of global tech leadership, a visionary billionaire hailed as the architect of the future. His companies, from Tesla to Starlink to Neuralink, defined an era of American ambition, disruption, and audacity. But in 2025, that empire didn't just fall, it unraveled in real time. As Tesla's stock collapsed and its market share evaporated, Starlink faced a parallel implosion. European regulators, already furious at Musk's political interference, revoked Starlink's operating licenses. Canada shuttered its contracts. Developing nations, once eager for Musk's satellite connectivity, pivoted to lower cost, less controversial alternatives. What was once a symbol of global innovation had become a pariah brand, tainted by nationalism, instability, and strategic recklessness. In the media, Musk became a caricature of himself. His social media outbursts grew more erratic. His public appearances invited jeers instead of applause. Former allies distanced themselves. Board members resigned. His name, once a marker of innovation, now carried the weight of economic disaster and political toxicity. Inside Tesla, employees no longer whispered about survival. They braced for layoffs. Once loyal executives jumped ship, the company's valuation dropped below that of legacy automakers it once mocked. And for the first time, Elon Musk found himself facing the one consequence he never anticipated: irrelevance. So what do you think? Musk's failure or a global reset? Drop your take in the comments. And if you're still watching, you know this isn't just tech, it's economic warfare. Like, comment, and subscribe. The story's only getting started.